Parimal Bhai to hand over a token to him as a mark of our.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a little bit of a difficult job because I am standing with you before you after lunch and before tea. So while some of you might, want to sleep and maybe looking eagerly for tea, we'll try and make this short. Especially because the topic is, very objective. Miscellaneous remittances from India, as you know, involves current account regulations, the LRS scheme, etc. And the topic is very objective that way. But I would encourage all of you, based on your practical experience dealing with your clients and with the authorized dealers, with bankers. If you have any particular experience to share, please raise your hand so that everybody else gets the benefit. I may not have the benefit because, as Rajesh Bhai said, I have been in the US for 3 years, so little bit of out of touch in terms of the practicalities, what is happening on the ground. Uh, but with that few words, let's start. Uh, so the agenda is overview of the current and capital account transactions. I know you must have heard this since yesterday, so I'll not spend a lot of time. What is capital account? What is current account? Use of international credit cards, debit cards, miscellaneous remittances from India, surrender of foreign exchange, how much foreign exchange can be kept by a person resident in India, the LRS scheme, which has been a significant development in India's endeavor to convert rupee from current to capital account, foreign currency accounts by person residents in India, particularly the RFC and RFCD account. We'll discuss on that, and then lastly, remittance of assets. As I said, please feel free to intervene, give your comments, and try and make this interactive. Just to give a quick overview, as FEMA divides transactions into capital account and current account transactions. Capital account transactions are prohibited unless specifically permitted, because rupee in India today is not convertible on capital account yet. So that's the difference between capital and current account. Whereas current account transactions are permitted unless they are specifically prohibited, because the rupee is convertible on current account. As far as current account transactions is concerned. So just to give a very simple example, if you buy an asset from abroad, it may be part of your fixed asset like a machinery, etc. But because you don't have any asset or liability abroad, it would still be a current account transaction for you. So like buying a machinery, etc. But if on the other hand you buy a machinery on loan from someone abroad, or say buy goods on loan abroad, it may be a trading asset for you, the goods, etc. But because you have created a payable to someone outside India, it becomes a capital account transaction. So that's a very simple distinction between what is capital account and what is current account. If you go to the permissible capital account transactions and how it is defined, capital account transaction under section 2E means a transaction which alters the assets or liabilities, including contingent liabilities of a person resident in India or liabilities or assets of a in India for person resident outside India. And how is current account transaction defined? Means a transaction which is other than a capital account transaction. So very simply, all transactions which do not fall within the test we laid down of assets and liabilities in India of a non-resident and outside India of a resident, they fall under current transactions. Except where the current account transaction rules defines certain 4 types of transactions to also form part of current account transaction. Now, if you see, most of them are really clarificatory in nature. Payments due as interest on loans. It is supposed to be a current account transaction. So, in my view, it is more of a clarificatory in nature. Remittances for living expenses of parents. Again, this would not create any asset or liability for me outside India. Expenses in connection with foreign travel, etc. These are more clarificatory. The only important point to note is short-term banking and credit facilities in the course of business. So if you have, as an Indian company, if someone has a short-term loan from abroad, that would be considered as a current account transaction rather than a capital account. The only difficulty is the law does not define what is a short-term credit. So would 6 months under the ECB regulations be short-term? Would 3 months be short term, etc.? And what do you mean by credit facilities? Would banking facilities can be understood, but credit facilities, if you have a buyer's credit or supplier's credit, the ECB regulations provides for that. But other than what is provided in the ECB regulations, would that also fall under current account transaction? To my mind, at least for me, I'm not clear if that is defined in law. But if someone has any particular experience, maybe he can share. So that's on the broad overview. Capital account transactions are again divided into Schedule 1 and 2 as per the capital account transaction regulations. Schedule 1 deals with transactions of a person resident in India, and we will only discuss that because we are today discussing remittance facilities for residents. And Schedule 2 is a transaction of persons who are non-residents. Except that the following transactions are specifically permitted. So business of chit fund, nidhi fund, agricultural activity, real estate business, trading in TDR, these are specifically prohibited from being carried out by a person resident in India or outside India. Now why this is important for us is, if you look at the LRS scheme, which we will discuss later on, it allows remittance for all permissible capital account transactions and current account transactions. So what are the permissible capital account transactions? Those would be transactions which are listed in Schedule 1, namely investment in foreign securities, any foreign currency loans in India or abroad, buying immovable property, guarantees, export-import of currency, maintenance of accounts abroad, loans to a non-resident, loans from a non-resident, taking an insurance policy. So today you could use the LRS scheme for buying an insurance policy from a company outside India, or sale purchase of foreign exchange derivatives. But at the same time, as I said earlier, because these 5 transactions are specifically prohibited, you cannot use the LRS scheme for these 5 transactions. Now let's look at current account transactions. As you know, current account transaction rule says any person can sell or buy foreign exchange from an authorized dealer for any current account transaction unless they are regulated. Now what are the regulated transactions? The regulated transactions as per the FEMA current account rules are divided into 3 parts. Part 1, where transactions are completely prohibited. Part 2 is where transactions require central government approval. And part 3 is transactions which require RBI approval. Now just for your information, I have listed them down, without really having much to discuss on Schedule 1 and 2. But importantly, Schedule 3, if you look at the items in Schedule 3, it provides for various monetary limits on certain transactions. So for example, if you are going on a private visit to a particular country, then you cannot draw more than $10,000 in a financial year. It's not per trip, it's per financial year. Similarly, gift remittance and donations cannot be made exceeding $5,000. Persons going abroad on employment cannot take foreign currency more than $1 lakh per year. Similarly, for immigration, you cannot take more than 1 lakh. But what is to be noted is that there is no documentary evidence required for some of these transactions. Like going for employment or going for immigration, you can freely remit up to $1 lakh without any documentary evidence provided to the AD, just on the basis of a self-declaration. Also, certain transactions like maintenance of close relatives abroad. So for foreign expats who come to India for employment, they can remit their entire net salary after payment of taxes for maintenance of close relatives abroad, and in other cases you can remit only $1 lakh. Now you'll notice a slight distinction between A and B. In the case of a foreign citizen, he need not be an employee of a foreign company. So he can be just a freelancer who comes to India on employment, and on that basis he can remit up to his net salary. But if it is an Indian citizen, then he has to be an employee of a foreign company, and then he can come to India on deputation, secondment to the JV or wholly owned subsidiary. So that's one distinction. Under LRS he cannot today. See, it's 75,000.
So $100,000 he just remitted from here to outside, and then he can use this amount for any purpose over there, or what is the any restrictions or?
No, so if a person is going abroad on employment, then he's changing his employment status, then he can take $1 lakh. The current account rules do not say that that has to be used only in connection with his employment, etc. He could use it for his personal purpose. For example, he's transiting his house abroad, for whatever purpose, he can still use that $1 lakh limit.
So it means that LRS under which the house buying property is restricted, but he can use this $1 lakh.
According to me, he can, because there's no restriction under this. As long as he's going on employment abroad, he can use the $1 lakh scheme.
So in this case, how this amount to be remitted? Because here he is holding the only resident Indian account, rupee account. Then this amount is to be remitted under which account he can remit it?
As an Indian resident, obviously he cannot open an account abroad. I am not sure. Maybe if he goes abroad on employment.
Once he becomes a non-resident, the question of LRS doesn't arise.
He cannot do, correct. So once he becomes a non-resident, he goes on employment, then he can open an account abroad over there. But I think the question is, in the meantime, what happens? So when he goes on employment, he's still a resident. He's not yet a non-resident. So when he's going, suppose when he's still in India, he's going abroad. There's a practical difficulty on the time gap. He becomes an employment when he goes, say the day he's going abroad on employment. So if he's drawing foreign currency before that, I'm not sure how he would be able to deposit that money in a foreign account. That's a good question. I don't know, anybody has any thoughts on that? According to me, there's no restriction. So as long as he's taking the money for employment, I think he can still remit. He should prove that it is for the purpose of his employment. I think a reasonable time limit should be set. So for example, if he remits after 6 months, then he cannot say that he's taking it for employment. If it is within a few days, you could still argue that it is for the purpose of employment. But I think the practical difficulty on bank account might be there, I guess. From the NRO account, you can remit up to $1 million. That is under the remittance of assets. That's a different scheme. Similarly, there's a restriction on payment for consultancy fees for a project, up to $1 million for $10 million for infra projects and $1 million for other consultancy projects. Now, I am not sure why this restriction is there, because today royalties are free. You can remit irrespective of whatever you want, other than the fact that now there's been some discussion in the government that Maruti and other companies are stripping profits from their Indian arm by taking a lot of royalty. So there's some discussion of bringing back the regulation. But other than that, there is complete freedom. So I don't understand why this consultancy service restriction is still there as part of law. Again, what is meant by consultancy service? Can we take the income tax definition of professional, technical, or consultancy and say that technical and professional services are allowed, only consultancy is restricted? Again, that's something which is not clear. The other important limit is for pre-incorporation expenses. You can remit up to 5% of the investments brought to India, subject to or $1 lakh, whichever is higher, for pre-incorporation expenses. Sometimes we have seen clients ask that, what happens for expenses which are incurred after incorporation. So obviously you cannot open a bank account immediately on incorporation of the company. So the foreign company might still have incurred some expenses after incorporation. So as per RBI, informally we understand that could be a difficult situation. The FIBB might not allow you remittance of post-incorporation expenses, and the RBI will treat it as a deemed loan by the foreign company without actually. Have you got the permission from them? Because what I understand from RBI is we have seen clients, and when we ask for the RBI, they say we are not going to allow repatriation of this. Right. So that's what the RBI is saying, that it is a deemed loan, but will not allow you under the ECB rules. That's what we have been told. It's technically a loan, but doesn't fall under the ECB regulations. That's what we are told. And so we have applications which are stuck up where they have not allowed for conversion to equity, nor they are allowing for repatriation. But as you said, you not got permission so far, right? You applied for them. Right, but also what is important is that it is not automatic. Some people take a view that it is automatic, it falls in pre-incorporation. It is not pre-incorporation. Pre-incorporation means strictly pre-incorporation, before incorporation. The other topic is use of international credit cards and debit cards. So as you know, today you can apply for a ICC or IDC from a bank in India. As per the current account rules, an ICC can be used for travel abroad in connection with various payments, or for online subscriptions, journals, etc., for meeting expenses while a person is abroad, etc. The only restriction is it is not allowed for prohibited items like lottery tickets, banned items, etc., and for payment in foreign exchange to somebody in Nepal or Bhutan. Limits under Schedule 3 do not apply to international credit cards. So the limits which we discussed earlier, $1 lakh or $10,000, whatever, they don't apply if you are using an international credit card. And what the rule says is that the limit will only be the limit as per the bank which issues the ICC. So in some cases, if you have an Amex Gold card or something, you might have limits which are $50,000 or whatever. So you could still exceed the limits under Schedule 3 by using an international credit card. One question practically which comes sometime is whether you need a 15 CB when you are making payment through ICC. In my experience, I have seen some clients who make remittance by using a credit card without obtaining a 15 CB or a 15 CA, which I think is a dangerous situation, because under law, remittance in foreign exchange includes remittance through ICC. So technically, you need a 15 CA, 15 CB, even if you are using an ICC for making a payment to someone abroad. And as we know, practically in assessments, what department does is they will ask you for, if you have made a foreign payment, where is your 15 CA CB? You say, we don't have 15 CB. They'll say, okay, under 195.2, you're not allowed. So without going into the merits, they would disallow deduction for the expense. So therefore, I think that is important. True? Yeah, I don't have practical experience. But I think the rules permit payment by other modes. 15 CB is an issue. Right. There's no checklist by the bank to restrict you. It is similar to the ICC. So I think as we need to advise our clients that even if you are using a PayPal on ICC, you still need to get a 15 CB and give us some more fees, I think. Sorry? No, that's not the bottom line. That's actually a violation of law. Going to certain miscellaneous remittances from India. Sorry.
As you said, an international credit card. If there's a company or director is using a personal card, personal use, and then he's claiming a refund he's claiming a claim from the company. While company is making a payment, company is reimbursing. So I've heard even what someone take a view, I'm reimbursing the amount, I'm not making a payment. So you can so then under 195 you're not, it doesn't, it says you're making a payment. And here I'm giving a claim, refund claim. So then still will require 15 CACP, or how will need to go ahead?
So the person is using an ICC abroad.
His personal ICC is abroad, he's just
Right.
making expenses on behalf of a company, then he's claiming.
According to me, yes, because ultimately, indirectly, the payment is made to a non-resident. And if the payments are covered under 195, they are, royalties, technical fees, whatever, are taxable under 195, then I think still 15 CB is required.
Then whom should we, in 15C we need to mention the payer and the pay. So will we addressing the pay either the director or the third party?
No, it would be the ultimate entity, because there are a lot of these case laws which say that if you are a pass-through cost, then it is still taxable because payment is made indirectly to the foreign beneficiary. So
then the TDS has to be before we need to gross it up and then we need to just pay.
Because obviously the party, you would not deduct from his payment, so you need to gross it up and pay it. I don't know, anybody has a different view there.
International credit cards and international debit cards are issued by the Indian banks, and you are going to make the payment in the Indian rupee to ICICI. So there is no question of applicability of 195.
No, so I think his question is that the director is using his ICC and I am reimbursing him in rupees.
I agree with you, but that ICC is issued by Indian bank.
True.
Had it been a case of Bank of America, if I am migrated, I am in US, right? I have a bank account with Bank of America. I have an international credit card. Now I am migrated, and now I'm using that international credit card. Then a question would arise about the applicability of 195. Otherwise, if I am an Indian resident, because current account transactions will apply to Indian resident, and I am an Indian resident, I am holding ICC or IDC, but they are issued by the local banks, and I am making the payment to the local banks. So there is no questions of applicability of 195. Howsoever, it will apply to ICICI under the merchant banking payment to the counterpart in US. There a question would arise about the...
But the merchant banker or whatever is only acting as my agent. It is my responsibility to pay to the non-resident vendor or whoever is giving me a service.
I know, but then when I make the payment, it goes out of 195 because it is the payment in Indian rupee.
It doesn't have to be payment in foreign currency to be
No,
195.
if I go to 195,
It says payment in foreign currency or
To non-resident.
Yeah, it doesn't say foreign currency. It has to be a payment to.
no, I agree with you, but it is a payment which is to be made to non-resident in order to apply 195.
Correct.
A
So-
sum which is chargeable to tax,
Correct.
and if its payment is made to non-resident.
Correct. So
now
you
I am
are a-
making the payment to Indian banks.
No, but my director, who's my representative, has
Yeah.
made a payment to a non-resident. Which
I
is,
agree with you, but that card which is issued by whom? That is more important because ultimately director, for example, I am a director, I am using ICICI my personal credit card. I am making and then I am reimbursed, something like
No,
that.
but who's the authorized? Who is supposed to make the payment here? You know, it is not the bank. If suppose the payment is not made for whatever reason, it is I as a service recipient is responsible. So in my view, 195 applies, but I think you make different view. Substance over form. Okay, travel abroad. Just laid down certain rules here for travel abroad. So if a person goes on a travel, when can he draw foreign exchange? It should be not more than 60 days before the date of travel. One or more private visits to any country other than Nepal, you know, the foreign currency can be up to $3,000, and total foreign currency drawal is $10,000 per year. We saw that earlier. Employment, immigration, we saw that. Business travel is $25,000 per visit, not per year. Medical treatment abroad, the limit is $1 lakh on self-declaration or estimate from the overseas hospital, whichever is higher. For a person who's accompanying a patient, I think is another limit of 25,000. Students abroad, we already discussed that. So these are some of the limits. Which one?
Need not be a transfer to a bank, but we can carry the traveler's check of $1 lakh. That is the solution.
Instead of opening bank account.
Yeah, you could have a traveler's checks. Yeah,
That is permitted, and that limit is being applied in that case.
in that schedule. That is correct.
And you make a payment to a non-resident. Out of that 25,000.
Sorry? Yeah, it depends on the chargeability. So if assuming the payment is chargeable to tax, TDS would apply because you are, you know, if you are an employee, as a director. Yeah, still the law 195 doesn't exempt you if your payment is made abroad or if the payment is made, as long as the payment is made to a non-resident, 195 applies. What is Vodafone today? Payment made abroad by one non-resident to another. Maximum amount that can be carried back in rupees is $10,000, denomination not exceeding 100. Foreign currency you can carry up to, there's no limit on carrying foreign currency back, but if the amount exceeds 10,000 in notes, in total foreign exchange, and 5,000 in notes, etc., you need to declare at the airport. Maximum amount that can be paid in rupees to buy foreign currency is 50,000. And you can book tickets from, let's say, going from New York to Boston by making remittance from India. Surrender of foreign exchange, again, there are certain rules. Unused foreign exchange by a resident individual can be kept up to 180 days. But if it is on account of foreign travel, then it can be kept up to 90 days. If it is in the form of currency, there is no restriction on coins. If it is in the form of traveler's checks, etc., then it can be kept up to 180 days. In all other cases where somebody has earned foreign exchange from abroad, he has to surrender within a period of 60 days. Again, certain restrictions on retention. Right.
If I open up the branch overseas, then the profit of branch, would I require to surrender?
If you opened a branch
guess it
overseas,
is-
you would open a bank account overseas, right?
Yeah.
Because the law allows you to open
But
a foreign bank
that is for
account.
sure, because I have a full-fledged functioning branch overseas. Branch will have undoubtedly a bank account at local place, but it is the branch. So FEMA applies because the residential
Right.
status of the branch would be person resident in India. And if I earn the profit, would I require to remit the
Now,
profit?
only thing I don't know is under that foreign currency accounts by person resident in India, under that rules, whether it allows you to retain the, sorry. No, not in the closure.
So that
His-
is
his
about,
question-
not, I'm
No, not in
talking
the
about the
closure.
recurring profits.
That's under that foreign currency
No.
account rules.
That is a separate issue. What I'm saying, like profit of the branch. Profit, yearly profit of the branch.
So it seems in the regulations it allows you to retain profits abroad.
Okay.
But you are right, otherwise as a resident I need to bring foreign currency back.
Yeah.
If this exception was not there.
Expenses has to be from inward remittance from here to abroad. All the profit has to be brought back. Correct. Correct. No.
Then within how much time do you
At the year end.
Friends, I think we request the speaker to complete his presentation, that there are many topics to be covered, and then we can get into the further discussion.
Okay. Going to retention of currency, as we discussed, you can retain currency up to $2,000 and no limit on coins. Similarly, you can also retain currency in respect of amount which you acquired abroad for any services which you provided, which are not arising from an Indian business. So if you have provided somebody a service in India and if you go abroad and take currency, that cannot be retained. But if it is in relation to a services provided outside, you can retain that. Similarly, residents who are not ordinary residents, so a foreign expat who comes to India, he can retain foreign currency notes without any limit if such currency was owned when he was a person abroad. So when whatever currency he brought with him on change of residential status, he can retain the entire currency without surrendering and without the $2,000 limit applying to him. Now the LRS scheme. As I said in the beginning, the LRS scheme was a watershed development because it actually allowed conversion of Indian rupee to foreign currency, which means on a capital account, of course subject to a certain limit. So the initial limit was $25,000. It increased to $2 lakh, and recently last year it was brought down to $75,000. The limit is per financial year. It is not on a net basis. So if you invest in securities outside India, you bring back, say out of 75, 25, now you say I have further limit of 25, that is not permissible. It's on a gross basis per financial year. It is allowed for any capital or current account transaction. So the restrictions under Schedule 3 would not apply to the LRS scheme. Some illustrations of permitted use: any current account transactions, capital account transactions, purchase of objects of art, remittance for acquisition of ESOPs, repayment of loan availed abroad. Some restrictions on use of LRS. items which are prohibited under Schedule 1 of current account rules, purchase of FCCBs of Indian companies, remittance to countries which are identified as non-cooperative, and Mauritius is one country. So we have sometimes clients asking, can I do a tax planning by setting up a Mauritius company under the $75,000 scheme, which you cannot. The FAQ clarifies that income on foreign securities which are invested through LRS can be retained abroad and need not be brought to India. Effective 14th August last year, remittances for acquisition of immovable property were prohibited probably because of the currency situation. But if any contract was entered up to 14th August 2013 and you want to fulfill that contract, remittance can be made for buying immovable property abroad. Rupee gifts to NRIs and PIO crores relatives can be made under the LRFs, and gifts should be credited to NRO account. Now here I have little bit of a doubt because this comes out of a FAQ that you can use LRS scheme to give gift to NRI PRs in India. But if you look at section 3 of FEMA, it does not allow you to make any payment to or on behalf of or to the credit of any person resident outside India. And according to me, gifts to NRIs, PIOs within India is otherwise not permitted. So I think the question is that something which is not permitted specifically by law, can it be brought about by way of an FAQ? I have no answer to that. Lending of money to NRI, PIO close relative is allowed. As you know, under the ECB rules, ECB in rupees, a person resident in India can lend to a NRI, PIO. So the same conditions have been put in the LRS scheme. But note that it is only for close relatives. So if you want to use the LRS for lending to someone who's a non-relative, then as per the FAQ, indirectly it means that you cannot lend to someone who's not a relative. Even though you may say that under the permissible capital account transactions, lending to a non-resident is a permissible transaction. Similarly, last year there was a circular which said that you can also use the LRS scheme to set up a joint venture or wholly owned subsidiary abroad. Before that, I think there was a lot of confusion whether I could use the LRS money to set up a company abroad, and certain cases went for compounding before the RBI because some people use the money and RBI felt that it is not permissible. But now they have clarified that you can also use money under the LRS scheme to set up a company outside India. One more issue which I have and I've kind of noted here under the LRS scheme is that similar to a loan to a non-resident, what happens if you have a non-resident relative and you give him, you incur his medical expenses? So whether that would be permissible under the LRS scheme. Now if you look at the FAQ, it allows a 75,000 limit to be used for incurring medical expenses. But if you look at notification 16 of FEMA, it says that an Indian resident can make payment for boarding, lodging and services relating thereto for travel in India within India. So if you remember that 2-pager notification which says that you can only incur expenses for boarding, lodging and services relating thereto. Now the FAQ under LRS says that medical expenses is a service relating thereto and it's a payment to a resident, one resident to other. So therefore it is permitted under the LRS scheme. But there was a committee which was appointed, and I think the report was issued somewhere in August 2011 for looking at various facilities for residents. And that committee said that payment for medical expenses of a relative who comes to India is a violation of the exchange control regulations. So bringing an FAQ and making an amendment by an FAQ, I don't know how it cures a violation which was mentioned by the committee.
Resident relative, but making any other payment also, that will also be a violation.
Yes, I think as long as it doesn't fall under this boarding, lodging and services relating thereto. When it says services relating thereto, according to me it means which are connected with boarding and lodging. So if it doesn't fall under this, then I think it would be a violation. No, but there is, but under what it is? But that must be because of the FAQ. The FAQ says that it is allowed, but there's nothing in law which says. The other thing is, I don't know if you all have experience, but we have seen sometimes banks asking for a 15 CB or a A2 form for under the LRS scheme. The scheme is very clear that you need to have a simple self-declaration 3-pager document. There's no need for an A2 form or a 15 CB, but we have seen some banks asking individuals to provide both these documents. Similar to what I said under section 3, there's also this issue of giving rupee gifts to NRIs in India. So again, the FAQ here says that you can make a rupee gift to an NRI, but if you look at section 3 and the fact there's no legality in the regulations, it cannot be permitted technically. Similarly, gifts to NRIs on marriage. So if you have an NRI bride coming to India and she gets a gift on marriage, again technically that is not permitted under FEMA. So when under the LRS scheme, when I can remit, up to $200,000 or now $75,000 to an NRI, and he puts money in the NRO account and then he remits abroad, it's in a way it's like a circumvention of the regulation, because otherwise I could not have gifted. You could not use a gift money or a donation money for remitting abroad. RFC account and RFC domestic account, probably I'll not go into much detail, but just to let you know, you already would know, an Indian resident can open an RFC account as well as a RFC domestic account. For RFC account, what is allowed is foreign exchange received as pension, etc., or realized on conversion of assets which were acquired when a person was a non-resident, or received as gift or remittance. Now, one restriction is that for remittances from RFC account, there are no restrictions. So Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 of the current account rules do not apply to remittances from the RFC account. On the other hand, the law also allows for setting up a RFC domestic account, which is somewhat similar to a EFC account, because it allows a resident to receive money on account of any services which he provides outside India when he is visiting abroad. Again, not in connection with business in India, from any non-resident who is on a visit to India for any gift or honorarium or services. Unspent foreign exchange for travel can also be put in the RFC domestic account, gift from relatives, etc. But the remittance from a RFC account is regulated by Schedule 2 and Schedule 3, so you cannot exceed the limits in Schedule 2 and 3. Foreign employees who are on deputation to India can also open accounts abroad. So a foreign citizen is permitted to open an account abroad for receiving salary from Indian employer. Similarly, Indian citizens who are on deputation to India can also receive the entire net salary subject to payment of taxes in India. One thing to note is that between the current account rules, which allows for net salary to be repatriated, that needs that a person should be a resident but not permanently resident. So if you know, the condition for not being permanently resident is that the employment contract should be less than 3 years. So if the employment contract is more than 3 years, he cannot use the current account rules to remit his entire net salary for maintenance of relatives. But under this particular regulation, where it allows me to receive my entire salary abroad, or to set up a bank account abroad to receive salary, that restriction of being a not permanently resident is not there. So which means that even if my employment contract, let's say an expat, is a 4-year contract, I can still under this regulation open a bank account abroad and directly receive my entire net salary there. So that's one distinction to note. The last topic is remittance of assets by non-residents. So foreign citizens who are expats who come to India for employment, they can convert their rupee account into NRO account and remit money like their rent, interest, dividends, whatever they receive. Similarly, NRIs can also open an NRO account, and permissible debit from there is the rent, etc., which is received. If an NRI does not have an NRO account, then he can apply to a banker for repatriation of his income from India, or he could credit the money to his NRO account in India. For foreign nationals who want to redesignate the rupee accounts to NRO account, there are certain conditions, and we'll very quickly look at some of them. Before he converts the rupee account to an NRO account, he has to give full details of his income, which will be received in that account, to the banker. And so he should be careful in bringing out all the remittances which he expects to make from India, like his PF dues or whatever. AD should satisfy himself that the credits have represent bona fide remittance to be made. The fund should be repatriated immediately, so you can't keep his balance in the NRO account and use it for earning interest on deposits, etc. So these are some of the conditions. Similarly, for under the $1 billion scheme, a foreign national of non-Indian origin who has retired from employment in India or who has inherited assets from India can remit under the $1 billion scheme, subject to providing necessary document to the banker. This facility is also available to NRIs, as you know. So NRI can remit out under the $1 million scheme out of his balance in the NRO account. Now, I don't know if some of you might have experienced the practical difficulty here. When you go to remit the money to the banker, he might say, give me a 15 CB certificate again. Now, if that represents my balance in the NRO account, what do I mention in the 15 CB certificate? If there's an existing balance in the account. I don't know if anybody has dealt on that issue. When I tried to ask someone, he said you just deposit that money in a fixed deposit for 10 days and then withdraw it and then remit it, saying that this is refund of your fixed deposit money. So that can be one practical way. Payment to self. I am put NRO account balance. I can have, it's an income which I earn on the deposit. Let's say a 10-day deposit. I earn a nominal interest. That amount, it's my NRO account. I can repatriate abroad. So in my 15 CB, I can mention refund of deposit from banks, and whatever interest is there, that is taxable. At least it gives a particular color of a transaction to the money. Yeah, but how would that be taxable? I mean, there can be practical difficulties, because let's say it was arising out of a immobile property transaction before 3 years, or some interest earned where practically you might not be able to identify the income component. But is it practical? I mean, how much? Yeah, I mean, how does one do that? Let's say there are hundreds of transactions. No, there are hundreds of transactions. How does one do that? The return would have been filed each year. Right. So let's say if my entire accumulated balance for 5 years has now been repatriated. So when the CA has to give a 15 CB, what would he, would he describe all the 5 years transactions?
In previous years, he must have filed the return. If it is like so up to last year, there is no problem. What you need to see is the current year's transaction.
So he has to reference all the transactions for him. That is another way possible. Somebody told me we do that. I mean, we just put the money in a fixed deposit for a few days and then repatriate that way. Similarly, if you have sorry. Yeah, there can be complications. Exactly. Exactly, yeah. A practical shortcut. No, my money is put in a fixed deposit, which I am refunding after 15 days. No, but then which transaction will you? No, but then which? But then which transaction will you? Suppose we have done hundreds of transactions in the last 3 years. You'll have to go back to each of them. Correct. No, true. Otherwise you have to go back to all the 100 transactions. You have to go back to all 100 transactions. Similarly, if you have an NRE account, then you cannot use the $1 million scheme to transfer money from the NRO to NRE account. You can repatriate the money abroad, but the law does not allow you to remit to NRE account or to remit to the NRO account of somebody else. Another practical issue comes on liquidation. So under the remittance of asset scheme, from NRO to NRE. The remittance is obviously allowed from NRO to NRE, but from NRO to another NRO account of somebody else, I don't know if that is. Then, if you have a company in liquidation, and the remittance of scheme allows for liquidation proceeds to be remitted subject to a certificate from a liquidator. Now, in the case of an Indian resident, you can also get assets in specie, but the remittance of asset scheme does not allow a non-resident to get assets in specie. So there will be a practical difficulty where during the liquidation, somebody in India can get assets in specie and sell it, but a non-resident will have to wait till the liquidation is over, get an official liquidator's certificate, and only then remit the net proceeds. These are some of the issues I thought maybe I should bring out in remittance of assets. If anybody wants to discuss anything else, or wants to go for an early tea.
Any questions for the speaker? I'll request Varsha to propose a very hearty vote of thanks.
Friends, whatever we study in FEMA, or finally, like what a particular transaction a person resident in India can do, or a person resident who is not resident in India can do. Ultimately, the client is interested in saying that his money is in his kitty. And the second thing is, when it comes to spending, he wants to do it with the least compliance or the botherations that is there. And so, whatever situations we have discussed today, itself shows how dynamic this subject is. So, sir has given us a very useful insight in understanding his provisions of remittances under different modes for different situations and different types of persons who can do. Sir, we are indeed thankful to you for this valuable contribution to our study course. And with these words, I request all of you to carry out this vote of thanks today. Thank you, sir. And sir, the issues that actually remain unresolved, we have taken note of it, and since we're going to have a brain trust and the case study session, definitely. And in fact, I would suggest that, because on Saturday we are going to have our case studies and brain trust. Whatever questions and in practical life, whatever difficulties you face and you want solutions, we got stalwarts answering our questions. So please note them down, and by Friday also, if you can give it us, we can still request the speakers to consider those queries. Thank you. We'll break here, but friends, the tea may not be ready immediately, so we'll have to wait for some time here. We assemble at 3:30, yeah. मैंने बोला ना, we can request them to consider. We will. अभी आज तो दे ही सकते हो.